Hi, my name is David Rice. This is my Substack Kick Christian. It's a podcast we're doing today where we have Jonica Hope with us. She was at the Missouri State GOP Convention Saturday, May 4th, and she's going to talk to us about what happened towards the end of the day with Ben Baker and Dan Stacy and some of the things that were occurring with those two individuals. So I
Mhm.
just, before we get into that, tell us what a GOP convention looks like.
So the Missouri State Republican Convention is a every 4 year thing.
Okay.
It's time that we come together, we nominate delegates who we're going to send to the RNC, and people to represent Missouri. Now, this is not a contentious year, so we're not arguing or debating a presidential candidate. We're all Trump people, right?
Yeah.
But in years past, it has been contentious because not only are we battling and fighting over platform and over, the rules committee and all this kind of stuff, the battle is also about who we're going to send to make sure that we're getting the right delegate that we want. Example, in 2012, there was, I would say, a contentious caucus here in Missouri because we had Sanatorum and Ron Paul and Mitt Romney that was going into it together. So there were divided slates, there were divided inbound delegates. It was just a hot mess express all the way around. So that was
Okay.
truly the caucus in 2012. This year wasn't like that. Of course, this year we're all delegates I'm not saying myself, they are all delegates bound for Trump, Trump supporters 100%.
So
So that wasn't.
how many people show up as delegates,
Um,
roughly?
Yeah, so it's all kind of based on the size of your district. It's all so many people from each county and the size of your county. It varies.
Mhm.
This year I think they were expecting 940 something. I don't know the official amount, and out of that 800 and something delegates, and then several hundred alternates showed up. So
Okay.
really, it can vary. It's all based on the census and all those kind of things like that. But then of course you have spectators, and that's where I was at this year. Years past, I've always been a delegate. This year I chose to sit out and I was a volunteer. And so I
Mhm.
was at a different place that I'd never been before because I was able to sit on the outs and observe the inner workings, and just not necessarily inner workings as far as the decision making, but just what was going on behind the scenes that the delegates weren't able to see because they were taking care of business at hand.
Sure. So when you're in the room and you're looking at everything, so like, describe the room to me. So, well, what it looks like for just the average person if they've never been into one of these caucuses.
Okay.
What should they expect if they walk in?
Sure. So that's always, everybody's always facing towards the front. So it'll be the stage center. And you usually have, especially in big groups, a screen and all that kind of stuff. And when you're seated by your district, but then more specifically your county. And
Okay.
so when I say seated, it's the delegates that's on the floor. And then in outlying areas, that's where the alternates sit. But it's very clear that these are delegates and those are alternates. And so the delegates are all set according to whatever the slate was voted on when it left the county and into district and made it to the state. So it's
Okay.
not necessarily alphabetical order. It's just whatever the order was that was submitted to the state. Now the alternates are placed whenever, sorry, my thing's going off. The
That's
alternates
okay.
placed based on their place on the slate. So let's say delegate number 5 has to go to the bathroom or they got to take a personal phone call. They take their credentials basically and they pass it off to delegate number 1. And so delegate number 1 is set. Well, then let's say delegate number 13 needs to leave. Well, they go to alternate number 2, and it just kind of correlates back and forth like that.
So what happens when you, of course, so this sort of leads into the end of the day and you started running out of people. So as people begin to leave and they go home for the day, because it was a pretty long day, I
That was a
think
long
it
day.
started, what time did you guys
Well,
start?
it was supposed to start at 9, and there's this whole misunderstanding that at 9 o'clock, gavel down, we start business.
Uh-huh.
At 9 o'clock is when the outside doors lock, and we or whoever's working the credentialing tables and stuff, we can't let anybody in.
Okay.
So at 9 o'clock, doors locked, but that's not gavel down. At 9 o'clock is when all the delegates are officially seated, and then you start taking those number to establish your quorum. And so that can take, if it's small county, it can take 5 minutes. But if it's a large group like this, it can take up to 45 minutes because you're doing full name. And you got to think, how many counties does the state have? Like 114, I think. So you have
Yeah.
to go 114 counties, calling out delegates' names, waiting for the I or the here or present or whatever
Mm.
they call it out. So that takes some time. So that's a misconception that at 9 o'clock we start. Well, then at that, then you've got to go through the whole voting. Are we going to accept the delegation or we're not going to accept it? All this back and forth. So gavel down
So
was
can I,
probably
can I ask a
close to
question
one.
here there?
Sure. Yeah.
Why would they not accept a delegate?
Maybe they weren't credentialed correctly. Maybe they were at the caucus and it comes to find out they weren't a registered voter. Or maybe they were a voter that was actually another party. And so maybe after through the credentialing process, there was some information that came out. So
Okay.
they may not set that delegate, but they would pull from the alternate pool
Okay.
automatically. And you would get that person's credentials, if you will.
So once everybody's credentialed and you go through this whole big process, long process, obviously, of
Yeah.
asking everybody, yes, my name,
Yeah.
whatever, and they all agree to that and they're seated, they're locked in. And they're not allowed to leave until everything's settled?
Not true. So here, I'm going to back up a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
As a volunteer, one of my jobs on Saturday was to it's kind of like a multiple things because everybody was on the floor taking care of business. There weren't many people that had been through a caucus that wasn't on
Mm.
the floor taking business. So an individual who is a volunteer had asked me to kind of come in and help her and help them. So anyways, one of the things I had to do was make sure the doors were locked. Well, common sense prevails, right? So at 9
Yeah.
o'clock, we're not supposed to let anybody out until we gavel down for lunch. And so at certain point, I don't remember the time, we took a break because we were trying they were trying to figure out the credentialing issue, whatever was going on. And I can speak to that a little bit. But so once we gaveled in and we moved forward, there was a break that was offered. There was a whole lot of miscommunication, and some people were told they could leave, some people were told they can't leave. My rules were nobody can leave. And so a lot of common sense, like there was um a service animal that needed to go to the bathroom. So they went to the bathroom, that, kind of thing. But at noon was with the original lunchtime, they were allowed to leave. But when you come back in, there was a credentialing process to go back through. And basically, my instructions was look at the name, look at the ID, match them up, they're good to go.
Okay.
And so it was a fairly quick process. Some of that shifted in real time. But again, that was done under the authority of the Missouri Republican Party.
Okay. So you can leave if there's a good reason to leave. You're not like locked in your seat with a belt tied around you or anything like that.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But the thing is, if you leave, you don't leave with your credentials. Those
Okay.
credentials stay on the floor. You're supposed to take with the exception of lunch. If you leave, you are literally supposed to, there's usually a floor leader for your county or your district. You
Mhm.
notify them. They look at the list, they say, okay, alternate number, whatever is up. They go pull that person, and then that person takes your credentials, puts them around their neck, and they sit in your seat.
Okay.
Literally, that's what happens. And so that way, if you come back in, people may ask, well, who are you? Can you identify? And it's to just protect the business at hand. It's a security measure. It's not because they're being mean and they want to hold you hostage. It really is a security measure.
Yeah. Feels a little bit like musical chairs.
A lot, yeah. Yeah, a
So,
lot.
so they go through that process, they get through towards the end of the day, but it's a long process. Everybody gets pretty exhausted.
You're in there for the
And
long haul. Yeah.
and so it started around 9 o'clock. It goes until like 8 o'clock in the evening. Is
Not
about when
intentionally. Um, historically, I have been personally out of there by 3:30 at the very latest. So this business that it went into 7 o'clock, that's rare. That I've never experienced that before.
I heard that when Ben Baker, Representative Ben Baker and Representative Dan Stacy went up, they were filibustering. Um, they were taking up
Not
time.
really. Some people say they were wasting time, kind of riding the clock and things like that. I can't really speak to that because I was not a voting delegate. I could just
Mm,
say from outside looking inward, there was a lot of outmaneuvering with Robert's Rules of Order. And
yeah. They
That's
were
really
using the
important.
procedures against convention goers, I think.
That could
And
be,
that's
yeah.
one thing that Grassroots seems to be weak on.
Mm-hmm.
Grassroots has a lot of passion, a lot of effort, and they do a lot of work behind the scenes.
Right,
But when it comes to Robert Rules of Order, they get
right.
hammered a lot on
Well, I
procedures.
know, like my husband and others hosted Robert's Rules of Order classes. So seventh, our district was strong
Yeah,
because we had several people attended over that same class like 3 times. And it was actually led by one of the parliamentarians that was on stage on Saturday. So we were not talking about just somebody from a committee that kind of knows it. We're talking about an expert led those classes. And
yeah.
so our committee, our delegation was spun up and they were taught and they were educated. And you saw some of that play out on the floor, like Don Carricker was one. There were several
Mm.
others that came to the mic, and it's because they went through the training. But yeah, that's when Ben Baker, Representative Baker, and Representative Stacy, they did, outmaneuver. Um, was it intentional? I don't know their hearts. Was it, hey, look around and take advantage of the situation? Possibly. I've heard scuttlebutt that there's been, there's a plan in place and then they use that, as part who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not the measure of man's heart. But what I was observed was yes, they did outmaneuver using Robert's Rules of Order, the body of the delegation.
So, so let's talk about that part of it. So when they got towards the end and when they used the Robert Rules of Order, what did the delegate body look like? How many people were left? Percentage wise, you think we were down 20%? We were down 40%?
We were low. I would say we were at least at half where we were
Half?
at, half of what we started.
What do you need for a quorum?
And that it's all percentages. I believe it's 50 plus one, 50% plus one.
And
So
we were shy of that.
yeah, I believe so. So what happened, and I'll go ahead and open up that is um people, and I mean, I've been tempted to leave too. What you have to understand when you're a delegate, you are there for the long haul. Like you have committed, and it is you're there. I mean, it is the Constitutional Republic in action. You're elected to serve in an official capacity, and you're there to serve.
Yeah.
You've signed for it. So about noon. So I'm talking about historically. Historically, you start, let's say 10 o'clock to give that time for seating of the delegation. So by noon, you break. By that time, historically, you've voted on your slate, you voted, or definitely your chair, maybe your slate, and maybe your committee man and woman, and then your electors. You break for lunch. And then you come back 1:30, whatever time this the chair sets, and usually it's like 1:30. And then you proceed with afternoon business, which
Uh-huh.
historically afternoon business is the platform and the rules and all those kind of things that has to be set to be sent up to nationals. So unfortunately, because of the way the day played out, we didn't get started till later and it delayed that. But historically, when you see people leave, it's going to be during the slate, or I'm sorry, during the amendment process and battling that out. And so that usually we have, it may be delegates will leave, I would say 5-10%, but you have plenty of alternates to seat. But because of, I mean, people weren't coming back from lunch, they left, they were done, they were frustrated, whatever reason, they didn't feel important, especially the alternates. I don't know how many times I had alternates look at me and say, well, I'm done. I've got to go home and do whatever. I'm not important. My role's not needed because such and such is here that, our delegation's here. That's fair. And I was encouraging to stay. You are important. This is where it's going to be to be needed. I know some people had live event, that just things they had to take care of, which is understandable because they weren't expected to go all day. But with the numbers, you have to keep that quorum. What happened was, and I cannot let the text message and things go publicly out of respect for the individual.
Sure.
But I witnessed this with my own eyes, and I have read and I've seen. So what happened and what I believe quorum was lost, I believe when the tow truck issue came up, I believe we were probably right there on the line. I literally looked at the individual sitting next to me and I said, I think we've lost quorum. But I didn't say it out loud. It was just kind of conversation sidebar between the two of us. And I have pictures of that are, I've had pictures and I've seen pictures of, say, the vote for Dr. Merriam as chairwoman. I'm sorry, committee woman.
Did she
Full
succeed at that?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, I'm very excited about
Oh,
that.
that's good for her.
So she succeeded, but the room was full of people. Of course, we go to lunch, people get frustrated, come back at the end of the day, right before the tow truck issue came up, there was a picture taken, and there was already, I mean, we were probably below quorum at that point. So the tow truck issue. Now, myself and another individual had left to go grab a meal to eat, a bite to eat. And so we come back across, we were over on Walnut Street area was kind of where we went.
There
We
was an art
walked
fest.
through, yeah, it was over in the Art Fest area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were over there. My husband texts me and says that, or we gotten a text message saying they were towing cars. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't grab it right now. He said, okay, well, I'll go grab it. So he left floor, went and moved the vehicle. That 10, 15 minutes max that it took for me to finish eating, get through to come move our vehicle. Our truck had already been moved. But when I got there, there's no tow trucks in the parking lot. I'm like, oh, that's really weird. And I immediately went to something nefarious is going on. But then as soon as that thought goes through my mind, a young lady gets out of her vehicle and she's dressed in a prom gown and she looks beautiful. I notated to the person I was with and I was like, it must be prom. She looks very pretty. And she said, yeah, she looks great. And we just kind of went about our business. No tow trucks. So I get inside and in my mind, okay, I'm thinking, well, when I got here at 6:30, because I got there at 6:30 in the morning, when I got there was barriers set up.
Yeah.
And somebody knocked it down, I drove around it. So everybody else had done the same thing. And then I realized there's a dinner, there's a banquet, there's prom, there's something there. So they need those parking spots for the kids.
Yeah, the convention center had a prom that night from Billings. So,
Right. So anyways, as I'm walking in the convention doors, though, people are leaving. I was not there when the call to action basically had been had. And so I go in and I see people leaving and they're saying, we're done, we're tired, blah, 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 we're going home. And I'm hearing talk about the tow truck being called. And I thought, well, yeah, there's a prom, there's an activity going on. And so then, of course, Ben Baker, Brother Stacy. My pastor growing up was Brother Stacy. So Senator Stacy, of course, called the point, said we're not at quorum. And then I don't remember what Ben Baker said because it just happened so fast. And honestly, I was outside in the hallway talking to somebody, but I'm watching through the doors of this play out. And the next thing I know, Sophia is gaveling down. We've lost quorum, gavel down into caucus or dismissed or whatever what she said.
so when they gavel down and they end quorum because there's no quorum, that means
Right.
because without quorum, they can't vote to pass any of the
No business
resolutions.
can, correct. There's
So
business
some of the
can include.
Yeah, so some of the resolutions that they were trying to get to pass through have been resolutions to hold the representatives accountable for their
More
votes.
accountable, yeah.
Some
There was like
transgender
26
resolutions,
of them, 27 of them. There was some
Yeah.
about life, strengthen the pro-life stance, some about
COVID,
education.
yeah.
There was a couple about medical freedom.
Mhm.
And then definitely one of the heated ones was about the accountability amendment.
And
And
the
that's
reps
the
don't
one
want
that
that.
raised up in arms about. So
Yeah, yeah, because that's the one where it says if you want to be a representative that has an R next to your name, that when you go to Jeff City, when you vote, your scorecard matters. That if you're
yeah,
constantly voting for unconstitutional things like an omnibus that doesn't fit within it's unconstitutional just by the fact of what it is, or
right,
then you're voting for things that increase the power of DESI or increase the budget without any good reason. You're just
right,
adding pork.
right,
Um, you're not a conservative anymore.
right.
So we want
So
you to
people
be a Democrat.
yeah, so people on open arms, how much is too much? How much grace should we give our elected officials?
Yeah.
All this kind of, I go back and forth on it, because I can see both sides of it. I can see it from the official side, I can see it from the grassroots side. So my opinion is my opinion, and I don't really delve into it, but yeah, that was one of the
Yeah.
heated debates. And I mean, the conspiracy theorist side of me says, well, maybe they did use that lack of quorum and outmaneuvered, called quorum. And then, of course, that ceased vote. And so nothing went through. We had to
Yeah.
revert back to 26 platform.
And so, isn't this a 2016 platform? Because the
That's a
2020,
2016, yeah, 2016.
they put out a release saying this is the 2020 platform that Trump approved, but technically
Well,
nothing changed in 2020. So this
right.
is technically the 2016 platform.
It was
And
basically grandfathered in because we had no caucus. And I will say the 2016 platform, it was solid. There were countless hours set in a room
Yeah.
and us hammering out the things that we wanted to move for. And when I say we, I mean, there's several people that's in the movement this time that was there with us then. So it's solid, but there's been new issues come forth since 2016 that needs to be considered.
COVID is one issue. Having to go through COVID and some of the medical freedom issues, transit,
Right.
trans students playing, our boys playing on girls' teams is
Right.
another issue.
Yeah.
I think some of these issues weren't a problem in 2016. Also, some of the problems that we're seeing with election, possible
It hadn't
fraud.
even occurred in 2020 until 2020.
Yeah, because with
And there
Trump,
was,
yeah.
there
And
was to
so
say there was a belief in it, but we hadn't necessarily seen it play out yet.
Yeah, so there's all these resolutions that were put in, and people worked really hard. The
Right.
grassroots worked so hard on getting that in. And basically, these two people are doing a victory lap talking about how they saved the republic from the tyranny of the grassroots. But their action, their actions was the tyranny. And
Right.
I'll say that as a podcaster. I know you
Yeah.
don't have to say that, but
Well, I mean, I will tell you, there was a situation that came up and it was a little bit of a heated conversation. And the person that I had it with, it was what we perceive, and they are establishment, but perceive as establishment. And it was about a rule, and I looked at them, and they couldn't present the rule when I asked them for the rule. But then I looked at them and I said, that's the problem that Grassroots has with the establishment is the establishment doesn't play by the rules, but the rules have to apply to us.
mhm,
And
yeah,
that's why people are so frustrated is they are forced into these boxes, but then whenever it's time for these boxes to be applied to others, it's, oh, aren't you cute for trying? Kind of
yeah,
attitude.
they feel like they're above us. There's this elitism, and when the
Yeah,
grassroots are just people, you know, and the establishment, they act like they're not just people.
right.
They act like they're a ruling class.
And the argument could be made, and of course, this is getting into opinion rather than just facts of what I witnessed
Sure.
today. But the argument could be made that once you're elected, is it then when you're establishment, or is it further on once you've been in the system longer? At what point do you cross over from being grassroots to established? And I say that because Representative Baker, for instance,
Yeah.
I met him way back 2016 in the Cruz campaign for Cruz for president.
Hmm.
He was not an official. He was just a grassroots activist, working for Ted Cruz.
Hmm.
But over the years, since he's elected, the argument can be made. But then you got the other side. If you look at his voting record, it's, pretty decently solid conservative. And you can name off several others. I don't know Dan Stacy. I can't answer that one. So, at what point do you become the elite? And is that what we saw transpire on Saturday? Who
Yeah,
knows?
I've seen other things from Dan Baker. I'm sorry, not Ben Baker. That's my bad. I've seen other things from Ben Baker where he's gone after conservative journalists and calling them rich lobbyists, elitist, calling them Democrats, people who are conservative journalists and you know, saying things bad about them because they oppose a bill he wants to get passed, a bill that's unconstitutional by all standards. And he'll call them Westboro Baptist Church members on a radio show, and he'll say things like that. And I'm like, those types of behaviors, maybe he has a conservative voting record, but the types of behaviors, that's the kind of
Support
stuff you would
that.
see from like, oh, Dick Durbin, you know?
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, like at what point, that's why I said, at what point did he cross the line? The argument can be made. You look at other people that, like Mike Moon has been called an obstructionist because
Hmm.
nothing gets done, within
Yeah.
his, people look at that. So there's a balance. I always use the comparison of checkers and chess. In checkers, your main goal is to get your kings across the board as fast as possible, jumps through, and then depending on how you're playing and who you're playing with, you can actually, double crown and come back across. So that is a quick game. There's some strategy, but not a lot. You're just in it
Yeah.
for a fact. Checkers, though, you're always 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps ahead. And so, can the argument be made that some of these gentlemen, I'll use Ben Baker since that's who we're talking about, Is the decisions that he's making because he's playing chess? Or is it just because he's frustrated? Is it, and so then I'll compare him to like Mike Moon. Is it because he's playing chess, or is it because he's not serving the people? I think it's because he truly is a constitutional conservative.
Yeah.
And then you can even compare it to like Eric Burleson, Congressman Burleson. He is a good friend of our family.
Mm.
I've known him since he ran the first time, volunteered, worked alongside, et cetera, et cetera. And he's a chess player. People aren't happy and up in arms about the letter. I don't really want to discuss it because
I don't know. I don't know the
first,
letter, so
yeah, it's
yeah.
not worth the point. It's a moot point at this point. But people get frustrated. But if you look at his conservative voting record, it's one of the top in the nation. And he's
Mm.
always playing checkers, and people get upset because he's always playing chess. So that is the one thing. It just begs the question: was that a chess move or was that a checkers move? In my opinion,
Yeah.
it's a checkers move.
On
That,
Ben Baker's part.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he was aware the towing event was happening. I mean,
Yeah.
just from some of the investigation I've done. However, I do think he saw the opportunity and he's like, ping me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think happened. That's
Yeah.
really because maybe he was tired, maybe he had family obligations, who knows? And
Yeah. I think he realized there wasn't a quorum and he could shut down the resolutions. He doesn't want to be held accountable. I
and
think
I
at
know
the end of
there
the
was
day.
afterwards, there's been some scuttlebutt and rumors, and I don't try to deal in rumors, but
Yeah.
what I did witness was him walking up the stairs with Senator Stacy.
Hmm.
They were spirits. Supposedly there was some like a high five, fist bump, something like that. I did not witness that.
Yeah.
And then next thing I know, one of our grassroots leaders came flying down the stairs to go tell what she had just seen.
Hmm.
So maybe it was, a plan executed, not executed well, but maybe that was just kind of like the final move they had, and we gave it to them because everybody left to go move their vehicles.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about that. Back to the vehicles, the hotel. To get back to that, they had alerted volunteers like myself, like we're fixing to tow vehicles. And so that was an honest human thing. The individual, he's come out, it was Ron Sanders, popped
He
up,
went to the
asked
mic.
for
Yeah.
Mike, and he was just being a kind human. And that's all
Hmm.
it was. He was trying to say people. Now, was there a mistake made? Hindsight's 2020. Yes, he should have said, but come back and sit down. Or Madam Speaker, can we break for a minute to go let those of us move the vehicles and keep everybody else in place? Like it could have probably been handled better, but he was trying to be nice.
Yeah.
And then people got out there and they didn't see the tow vehicles. Well, again, memories and all this kind of stuff, it starts fleshing out after the event. If you remember, I walked across the street from Walnut Lawn. Behind the building, there were tow trucks parked there. And those tow trucks, the University Plaza was just giving us an opportunity to get our people out to have the chance to move our vehicles. They have a contract. What I have found out is that this particular tow company has a contract supposedly with University Plaza during large events to keep people out of their parking so that the people at their events actually can have the parking spaces. So
Do you
they
know
were
the
there.
name of the do you know the name of the company?
I didn't look at it that close. I really
Yeah.
didn't. So,
Okay.
but they were there. They were
Oh,
absolutely there.
all right.
And there was a whole lot, and this is my big synopsis of the day. And there's a few lessons that I would like to mention that I observed as somebody looking in. That situation was human error. Hindsight's 2020. Yes, it messed us up. Did we learn an expensive and a harsh lesson? We sure did.
Hmm.
At the beginning, was it human error? Absolutely. There's no conspiracy. If you know Nick Myers, and I don't know him super well, and
I don't
never in a
know
million
him at all.
years, yeah, well, never in a million years would I think that I'm like would expect to sit and defend the likes of Nick Myers, but here I am. Because if you know him and you know his body language, and you could see it was straight up not fear, but like what in the world, alarm, what was going on, and trying to figure out on the fly because we had delegates that were supposed to be seated that weren't seated. We had delegates that were supposed to be on the list that weren't on the list. It was put in the wrong order. Instead of being in the order sent from the county and from the district to the state, it was printed off in alphabetical order. And it was not paid staffers that were doing that. It was bad organization at the top. It was volunteers that was handling those slates and putting everything to make it. And it just was a human error, mess up.
Yeah, we talked about this on the phone, but it makes me wonder how many staffers the Democrat Party of Missouri has versus how many staffers, paid staffers we
Yeah,
have.
no,
And it almost makes me wonder, is part of the problem we're too cheap as Republicans and we're not paying for enough staffers? Because even if we only paid for 2 or 3 staffers leading up to this convention, more than we normally have, and they're just temporary staffers, and we brought them on for maybe 3 months to get this organized, and we brought them
right.
on every year, it would
Mm-hmm.
make a difference in the quality of our
That,
production.
but also bringing in people that have volunteered and worked this before.
Yeah.
Miles Ross, again, an individual professionally, we get along.
Mhm.
Uh, and I have that kind of, I would say, relationship that I can ask and say, Miles, tell me what happened. And he did. He was upfront. He's honest. He didn't try to pass the buck. But it was just his first caucus that he ran. So maybe, somebody that's done it before, either from a state level or even just a district level, should have come aside and then ask, hey, can you come aside and help guide us? Hindsight's 2020. Should it
Sure.
happen? Yeah. Do we need more workers? At one time, Missouri, from what I remember, and I could be misspeaking here, we had more and paid staffers, but now it's a donor issue, not enough money in the budget, whatever. And so money is an issue. I beg to say, and this again is Jonica opinion, this isn't necessarily fact, but
Sorry.
I don't believe people, oh, you're fine. I don't believe people are donating like they used to. So maybe it is a funding issue that they just don't have enough, but to staff for 2, and then the rest of it they go to use to, pay for support for Republican
Well,
candidates.
when the economy does turn down a little, it's hard to have as much money.
Right.
And I
But
worked as a,
Sophie, but to that note, like Sophie brought in a really well-trained parliamentarian, like that's his profession.
Mhm.
So could we set money aside, a couple of $1,000s out of the budget over, 4 years' time until the next one, knowing that for 3 months, we're gonna have to hire on people maybe from the RNC that have that experience to come in and help manage that? I think knowing what we know now, I think that should be a discussion at hand for the committee.
Yeah, I think that's one of the discussions we should be having. Another discussion is talking about parking, honestly. Also, the grassroots needs to stick around long enough to get good at this. We
Yeah,
can't drop out. And why Ben Baker wins, Ben Bakers of the world, the establishment wins, is because grassroots come in and go away, come in and go
yeah.
away. And because we don't stick around long enough, we don't learn how to fight
So then
dirty.
who knows the information? The establishment.
Yeah.
And who are, and I'm trying to switch my lingo from establishment to the old guard.
Mhm.
Because, at what point do we as grassroots become not just grassroots, but establishment? Is it you've, worked 2 campaigns, or you've been in this almost 20 years, like my family?
Yeah.
Does that make us establishment, or are we still grassroots? So I think that lingo needs to shift from establishment to just the old guard, those that have been in control for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are better ways of doing things than we witnessed. There's a lot of digital opportunities that can be invested in. The Ben Bakers of the world, they're not going away. They'll always be elected. But when you look at the high turnover of grassroots, they're going to continue getting elected
Yeah.
because that
And
longevity is not there
they'll
to
know
that.
the parliamentary tricks to
Right.
pull stuff like this.
So something, and I said, I can't believe I'm defending Nick and, Ross and professional relationships and stuff. Like we've been at this for very long. That's not my background. My degree is in education. I
Mhm.
started out as just a volunteer, as a grassroots volunteer, helping, funny enough, make phone calls for the Republican Party for John McCain. And it was
Okay.
anybody but Obama for me that year, right? So anyways, so we have a long history and we've seen some stuff. 2010 happened, Obama, the economy crashed, the housing market had busted, all this kind of stuff. So we saw the rise of the Tea Party. And I look around and there's just a handful of us that came in during that time that's still here.
Mm,
2012, here comes the Ron Paul, the crazy lunatic Ron Paul's people.
yeah,
I found myself in that group. I was not a Ron Paul supporter, but I was sympathetic to their mission.
yeah.
And anyways, so I look around again, there's still just a handful of us left that would have been fallen into that category. 2016, I look around, everybody was so excited about Trump. It's probably higher in numbers because those people are more around now.
Mm.
2020 was the real eye opener. So what I would encourage as someone that's done this a while, don't give up. The fight is just beginning. Like Saturday was an amazing victory. That foundation was laid in 2008 by the original a coup, if you will, from the Ron Paul, and then 2012 and then 2016. And that foundation, that's a victory, that's a shared victory across all the board with all the grassroots.
Can I ask
But
that question?
it's a victory, and we can need to stay around to continue the fight.
So I know that the resolutions were lost, but there were some people placed in positions that were a victory for the grassroots. Can you talk about that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, we know that our previous committee man and committee woman was Gordon Kinney and Carrie Almond. I don't know Carrie Almond. I've had one interaction with her, and I can just say it wasn't the most positive interaction. But that's okay. I didn't ever talk to her after the fact, but I moved on about it. And Gordon Kinney, again, worked with me for a long time, both for and against on different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a terrible person. He just represents the terrible things of the Republican Party that we're tired of. And so, and same for Nick Myers. He's not a terrible person. He just represents the terrible things that we're tired of. So we had, it's really exciting. We had Dr. Mariam Mahamakandi elected,
Yeah.
and we had Mr. David Leitner elected to serve as committee man and woman to the RNC.
Okay.
I know Dr. Mariam a lot better than I know David. So the best thing I could say about Dr. Mariam is we have a fighter. We have a firebrand. We have someone that we can get behind and support and encourage. And she's going to do good things for Missouri. Education is her passion. Babies, there's been a huge question of, is she pro-life? She absolutely is pro-life.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. That was a nasty rumor that was started, and it's got to
Well,
stop.
everybody
And
wants to say bad things about her, but I'm a huge fan. I really respect her. I know her campaign in Springfield, the school board was hard fought, and so I'm glad that she won. I am sorry that Chad and Landon weren't able to
yeah,
get over
that
the
was
line.
hard. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was hard. I actually volunteered on the PAC supporting them, and I'm still not sure how to put words to that, how I feel about that. The voters just didn't turn out. That's a whole discussion for another day.
yeah.
A lot of
So,
theories like that.
so, so there
David,
was a good move with David and Miriam
oh,
getting those
David's
positions.
amazing too.
Yeah,
He's savvy, politically savvy. He knows all the players because he's been in grassroots for a long time, like myself. So he knows all the names. Whereas that's not something Dr. Miriam knows. She has got a lot to learn. She
yeah,
just wants to sit back and learn the process and learn and make change. So it's good. That's a good, they complement each other well in those
good.
areas. So it's going to be fun to sit back and watch them. And I believe they're going to do Missouri proud, and that they're going to put us back on the map for politics.
How do you replace Nick Myers? I mean, what kind of
Vote,
vote does it take?
vote of
I'm
the committee.
okay.
And that, of course, reorganization is where it'll come from. Reorganization. I believe it's early fall. They have a fall meeting. I could be wrong on the timeline. It could be right after the first of the year, but it'll come after definitely after the primaries, when we seat the new committee men and women, and we go through all the vote and the reorganization at the local level and district level, and then it'll trickle up to the state. I've heard scuttlebutt of a few names. There are some really good grassroots conservatives that's probably looking to replace him. Again, scuttlebutt rumors. I've heard that he's not going to rerun that. And I heard that decision was made before Saturday. So it's not because of Saturday. I heard that actually going into Saturday, that he was kind of
There's been
done.
people calling for his resignation for months, and
Mhm.
and so I'm not
Yeah,
surprised.
I think that's all kind of And he's older now. I saw a comparison picture earlier from, I think the picture is probably 2016, 2017. He's a
Mm,
right. I mean, he looks different. He's definitely an older gentleman now. And I
eight
think he's just
years.
ready to be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
All right.
maybe, who knows?
Well, I'm gonna end the interview, but if you'll stay for a few seconds afterwards, I appreciate it. My
Sure.
call out, I'm working on it, but it's just real simple. But I try to say something like, "See y'all," and